Okay. Hi, Alan. I'm
Well,
Edwin Rutsch, director of the Empathy Center, and I'm here with Allan Rohlfs. And Alan has a book out called When I Listen, People Speak and Come Alive. And he's been working for, at least 5 decades on empathic listening, active listening. So you're like you've been at this for a long time.
a long time.
You're one of the granddaddies on this topic, and so really looking forward to talking to you. I don't know if you want to say more about by way of introduction.
Say again, I didn't hear that.
Oh, do you have anything else to say about just introducing yourself? Just who you are, what you're doing.
Well, I have been a psychotherapist as well, but I became a psychotherapist in order to learn how to do empathic listening. Uh, and I was in Chicago at the time at where Carl Rogers had been at the University of Chicago from 1945 to 1957. And Carl Rogers founded the Chicago's Counseling Center, which was a practicum and research arm of the clinical psychology program. After he left, the program sustained itself for a few years, but then it became a not-for-profit agency as opposed to a part of the university. So I come from, so I was around that, and I was taught particularly by Eugene Jenlin, who was a student of Carl Rogers. Jenlin was a student in 1950 or so, and I met Jenlin in 1969, 1970. So that was my first experience with it. And as I say in my book, I had an encounter with Jenlin in which he listened to me about something which was very, very disturbing and troubling for me. And it was mind-blowing for me. Uh, and after that experience, and I can say more about that too, but after that experience, I went to him after I figured out that it was empathic listening, that is how he responded to me. I went to him and asked him if he would teach me. And that was the beginning of what turns out to be my book. But my interest as a therapist I realized this was a learnable skill or a learnable way of being with others that wasn't the province only of professionals, that it could be learned by everyone. In fact, Thomas Gordon had taught it uh, particularly and specifically to parents with his book, Parent Effectiveness Training, and in his other book, Leader Effectiveness Training to business leaders, and much more. Um, I was interested because of my where I was at the time in the late 1960s and early 70s, which was the Vietnam War. I was interested in what I could do to make a difference in society. I was just getting out of graduate school at the time. And when I read Jenlin's article on community psychology, I saw that this was one thing that could be taught to lay persons that would then, as you well know, that would then increase the availability of a way of being with people when they were upset that was expanded everywhere and across uh, beyond what professionals could provide to people. So my interest in psychotherapy, which is a little bit more by introduction, as you were just asking me to, was that I started to learn how to do this and realized that the approach of Carl Rogers was doing this not just for 10 minutes and not just for 1 hour, but for the next hour and the next hour and the next hour and the next hour. And I thought, oh, well, I need to learn how to do this not just for 10 minutes in order to teach it, but how you do it continuously if that is ever
You mean as a way of being,
as a way of being.
okay.
Yes, yeah, yes, yes. And in the variety of kind of situations that people present themselves regarding, and the variety of ways that people talk, and the variety of kinds of problems that people speak about, which is what I got from learning psychotherapy. But my whole aim in doing that was to do this, my interest in social change and in providing this aspect, this way of being to people to broaden what we can do for expanding mental health and what formally is called community psychology. I don't call it that, but uh, that was the reason for my learning how to do therapy. So that's a little bit
Hmm. Right,
of
yeah.
my background.
Well,
Yeah,
there's, in terms of, there's Rogers who was working with active listening in the 50s and 60s, and then sounds like you got started in the late 60s and 70s. Is
that's
that
correct.
kind of
Right.
into it?
Really
And
in the early 70s
well,
is
early 70s, I mean.
yes, uh-huh.
So there's sort of this arc of the development of sort of
Yes.
this active listening, empathic listening, but it's more of a way of being. Like, hey, it's actually about a way of relating to each other. So you've been really early in this arc. I'm coming in, I guess, much later, like maybe 15, 16 years ago
Uh-huh.
to discovering it. But it's kind of the same arc, the same intention, same enthusiasm that you have,
Oh yeah, absolutely.
just for
Absolutely.
seeing the bigger picture. Hey, this is really profound. This is really a whole cultural way. It sort of points at a whole cultural way of being.
Yes. 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 Yeah. And is unfamiliar to most.
Hmm.
And here is this little thing that we can do. Um, it's actually quite a dramatic and radical change in responding to another person. But it is in terms of just describing the behavior, it is a little thing that we can do which changes the interaction with the person in a way that is life-giving. The language that I use anyhow is life forwarding for the other person. And as it is for the other person, I'm in it as the listener too. So it impacts me in the same way.
Yeah,
Yes.
so your book is covering sort of that arc of your experience and
Yes.
you're going into some of the nuances of empathic listening or active listening. Like what are sort of the elements of it, what happens? And so it's a real exploration of this whole topic of empathic listening from a long history. I mean, a long uh history of experiencing it. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. Yes. I had, I mean, the process of writing the book is a story in itself because I didn't know I had a book when I began writing. I was just writing an article, and it's about 8 years in the writing or so. But uh, what I realized is that um, there wasn't the haven't come across in all the books that are out there on empathic listening, on active listening. I haven't come across something that really attempts to go from beginner to most advanced. So I spend a lot of time on that, as you know from
Mhm.
reading it, a whole 7, 8 chapters on how to do it. Uh, and to my knowledge, there's nothing else like that. So that was one aim of mine was to have something that in my experience, is comprehensive,
Mhm.
starting with beginner, the very
Yeah.
first things that one can do.
The real contribution. Yeah, there's only one book that I know of that's more practical like that. It's by William Miller, who did. He has a book called Listening Well. So it sort of goes into some of the nuts and bolts. But I have a whole behind me, behind the green screen here. There's a whole bookshelf of books on empathy, but they're not like practical about active listening. It tends to be more theoretical and say you should do this, but it's not like, how do you do it? How does active listening work? How do we build on it? And I think that the active listening and what was made, Rogers, I think, so influential is he had a real practice, a practical practice that you do, as well as he was really good at the scientific theoretical part. So having both of those skills versus just the theoretical, which so much stuff out there is about that, having a real practice, I think, is so important. And that's what we try to do with the empathy circle, because one thing that's of interest to me is how do you see the arc of the development of active listening? I mean, there was, Rogers, and then Gene Jenlin came in, kind of built on his work, which sounds like that's where you connected. And then Marshall Rosenberg also, built on his work, and it sounds like you were connected with him, had personal, relationship, friendship, or what have you, as well as Thomas Gordon. So you're teaching the parent effectiveness training I saw on your site. So I don't know if you met him, but there's this whole arc of the empathic listening, that whole empathic mindset. And I'm just wondering, what insights do you have about how that has gone through, it's a culture, and kind of where are we now, and where do you hope that it goes?
Yeah, a wonderful question. Well, and uh, I'm I specifically haven't gotten involved with your empathy circles because I was in the process of writing the book, and that really occupied me, and I didn't want to be influenced by what anybody else had been saying. So behind me is the top shelf of my bookcase, which is all the books on empathy too,
Hmm.
including the one that you just mentioned, William.
Miller,
Yeah,
listening well.
yeah.
Hmm.
Although when I looked on your site, I saw there are 40 authors or so that you have
Oh, we had a book.
that
We
are
had a
writing.
book summit, an empathy book summit. We had speakers. They all had 10 minutes, and there was 44 book authors on
Yeah,
on
yeah, yes.
empathy. Yeah.
And I didn't know there were that many.
Oh, yeah. There's more.
I have to pause just for a minute
Mm,
to switch my phones here. Yes. Uh, so the arc of it, I haven't thought about that. What I did think was that had me wanting to write the book was to have something comprehensive in the way that I just said. But it's
mm,
also the case for instruction.
hmm
But I haven't necessarily thought, I haven't uh, heard the kind of argument for doing it in the way that I presented it. Now, it may be there in the other books, as you're alluding to, is that. Uh, so I wanted to do that as well.
hmm
My book is intended both for professionals or for students who are learning in the professions, and people are already using it, I found out, in classrooms. But it's also for the general public.
mm.
So I'm trying to make an argument for it because this is so unfamiliar to so many people. Uh,
So you want to make it available for anyone to sort of, as a, like, here's why you should use it, and here's some steps for how to get involved. So kind of reach out to a broader public.
yeah, yeah,
Hmm.
yes, yes. Here is something that makes a difference in daily living and in the interactions that we have daily that is unknown. And it's not only the difference is always one in which people are, and then the language gets funny, are are better afterwards.
Hmm.
And better is funny because that doesn't quite say it what it is. But people are the difference is one in which have they feel better and they have more life. Uh, at the end of speaking to somebody who was listening to them. So when I said earlier about life-giving, that's what that's really what I mean. Although that's a whole big idea, and I mean it in a smaller way. Just as when you a moment ago said what you heard me saying, I felt that.
Hmm.
And the feeling when you say that to me is one in which I go, yeah. And I feel it in my body. It's like my body opens up.
Yeah, so when somebody reflects back, is empathically present with you, you can feel it in your body that you have the sense of openness
Yes,
and yeah, and you can yeah, just it's a real felt experience.
it is a felt experience, and that's what I mean. And from Jenlin, who was a philosopher as well as a psychologist, in fact, his main work is in philosophy about process. That's where I learned how our current language doesn't enable us to talk about this uh,
Mm,
because of the way the language is
hmm.
constructed. We only have what I'm calling, and others, many others have called thing language, in which we uh, uh, have this thing and that thing and that thing. So there isn't a way to talk about process and what happens in the way that I was just saying, and you were just reflecting to me too, is we don't have the language to say, well, what happens there? What is this thing that I feel? Ah.
Hmm.
We don't have a word for that. That um, after being in this interaction, and you're reflecting me or me to you or whoever else it is, we each go away expanded. Uh, that we don't.
Hmm. Yeah, so there's what I'm hearing there, if I just reflect
Yes,
back,
yes, please
is
do.
that when you empathically heard, there's experiences that happen, and in the culture, there's not a set of vocabulary of words to describe it, the experience, and that actually, I would say that in your book, you're sort of trying to find those words. You're kind of it's like trying to put vocabulary, other words, in there in to describe that experience.
Yes, yes,
Hmm.
yes, because we don't have a concept for it because it's a process. And our language doesn't have process concepts. That's the idea that I get
Mm.
from Jenlin here. So what do I do? Well, I say you experience more. Well, that's a funny word. It doesn't mean much. But that's the best that I've got so far to say that at the end of the interaction, or just when another person empathizes with you, there is an opening within oneself in which more living, more experiencing, more feeling, more meaning is available to them. And uh, yeah, yes,
Yeah,
yeah.
well, I have that experience, as well. That I was doing managing a retreat center a while back, and it was just very stressful. And every week I had someone who would just do empathic listening with me for half an hour about whatever was on my mind. And it was a lot of sharing. Oh, this I have this stress, I have that stress, and all they would do is actively listen to me, and I would share, and I could feel my stress level, the tension in my body go down. So I think there is a vocabulary to describe it as the felt experience of what's happening in the body as that happens. So there's an expansion, like you're saying, of sort of an inner expansion that's like more stress-free expansion. And there's a sense of connection. There's more of a sense of being who I am too. It's like, hey, I'm kind of being more authentic of who I am. And I think Rogers described it too. He said that he said people who have maybe a poor sense of identity, that it helps them create a sense of who they are. as well as for him when he has tentative ideas, and I find the same thing too. Just an idea that's sort of at the tip of my consciousness. That by expressing, at least trying to express what I can of it, that it kind of creates more space for new ideas to emerge and come into existence just by being heard by someone else. So that's a really helpful, you know, practice process too, for your own creativity and growth. Yeah.
Yes, yes, and hard to describe.
Yeah. Yeah.
And when you were just a moment ago searching for words yourself, that for me is an
Yeah.
example
Hmm.
of how tricky this is and how our present language doesn't focus on that and give us language for that. So we have to make new language for it. But but you just were doing the process for me of oh, well, how do I say this thing? Now that's on the speaker's part, not on
Hmm.
the listener's part. How do I say it? But it is in the interaction of empathizing that um, the speaker is enabled to stay with that tentative that you were just talking about, the tentative idea that they have, or the opening that they have in which more is coming to them. And they just faintly experience, but when they pay attention to the faintly experienced, it comes forth, it blossoms, it emerges.
Yeah. So it's
Yeah.
being able to describe that whole phenomenon and
Hmm.
put words to it. And we do the empathy circle, which
Yeah.
is
Yes.
kind of a next level. Like a lot of the, like Jenlin or Rogers, they as therapists, they would listen to someone,
Yes.
for an hour, and it seems to me like a one-way listening, right? And with the empathy circle is kind of a focus on maybe four or five people in a group, and then there's sort of like mutual listening, so it puts it
Yes.
more into the relational. And then people describe, oh, in the circle, there's a whole quality of the felt experience changes in the circle, right? There's just more of a feeling of connection in the group, a more sense of ease, and more. It's like, oh, I feel closer to everyone here than I do with my family, sort of experience. So there's a whole quality that happens when multiple people are sort of in this empathic state. And I mean, what our goal is with the Empathy Center is to transform society to make that sort of the cultural state, that the whole culture is more aligned with that mutual listening, and it's so much healthier. I mean, I find it a healthier state and less stressful, more creative, uh, more problems or oriented towards problem solving. So yeah, so that's like a good. That's it. The active listening, mutual active listening is like a starting point. And I haven't seen that from even in those movements. I mean, they didn't talk that much about the mutuality of it, and I think that was something that was missing. Like Rogers went from active listening, is a client therapist relationship. He went into encounter groups, what I think are pretty horrible myself, because it's just like, dog eat dog, it can be. Whereas I'm surprised he didn't go into like create the empathy circle because it seemed like the next logical step of his process of mutual listening. So I have some questions, I guess, about that difference, why he didn't actually create the empathy circle himself or focus on that versus encounter groups where everybody can just say whatever they want, and sometimes they get pretty brutal from what I've seen. So I don't know if you have any thoughts, insights about that.
Well, not necessarily on his going to the encounter groups, although I do. I mean, it's stimulating to hear that from you, and I'm thinking back because I was in that whole era too. Um, because that was the next thing that was happening in the culture, the human growth movement, human potential movement, and encounter groups is one of it. And so Rogers moved from Chicago to the University of Wisconsin, where he was for about 6 or 7 years, and then left academia and went to La Jolla, California, where he started well, there were two things: the Western Behavioral Science Institute, which was a collection of behavioral scientists. And then after a while, I don't know how long, then he left that and formed the Center for the Person, which was his group. Uh, and that still exists. Uh, so I just speculate that he went with what was going on at the time,
Mm,
that
hmm.
encounter groups were the new
Oh,
thing,
uh-huh.
and that he did that. Now, left behind was Jenlin at the University of Chicago, uh, and the Vietnam War and the counterculture, and Jenlin's students who, like me, wanted to figure out what they could do for an action of social change in the social change movement at the time. And Jenlin's students got together and thought that what they could do was to work to keep people out of mental hospitals because mental hospitals were so horrendous for people. So they identified people on the street that they called, the terminology that counterculture were called, heavy people, which means that a lot's going on for them and they're just on the verge of going into a mental institution, to see if they could offer empathic listening to them to keep out of a mental hospital. And that group of students would then meet once a week to support each other. And the supporting each other expanded so that they also invited the people who were the heavy people or the people they were working with to come into the once a week meetings. And then it was decided we'll teach listening to everyone in these meetings, whether you're uh, a layperson or somebody who is really troubled. That group was called Changes.
Mm-hmm.
And that's where I also learned.
Mm-hmm.
And that's similar to, not exactly like you're talking with the empathy circle, but everybody in
Right.
Changes each week, meeting once a week, would break up into pairs or small groups and learn and practice active listening, empathic listening. I use those terms
Mm-hmm.
interchangeably
Me too.
there.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, Now, and that went on, and there are still Changes groups around the United States. Uh, but you're talking about something that is quite different, and I love it. Uh, and what you're saying that I'm getting from this is that it support it, the, again, I don't like this language necessarily. It supports everyone when the listening is in the same circle and going back and forth, so that it deepens the sense of being with each other. And then, and as that deepens, then the openness or the both the feeling of connection, but the openness to oneself deepens as well. That's what I make out of
Mm-hmm.
what
Yeah.
it
So
is
there's an
that's
overlap with the changes. I it had some did a bit of work with Kathy
McGuire.
Menard
Uh,
McGuire. Yeah.
right,
So we
right.
had done some videos and stuff together, and
Mhm.
she was, I guess, one of, so you probably know her because is one of the
Very well. Yes.
founders. Yeah.
Well,
So.
I haven't had a
Mm,
conversation with Kathy for 30 years or
oh.
so, but
Mm-hmm.
I know her very well.
Mhm.
Yes.
You work together on these changes
Yes.
groups.
Yeah.
And what was
Yes.
the process in those groups for the empath? How did you practice with each other?
Well, uh, it varied. At one point, Jenlin came in and did a 10-week series in which he taught. And then he would teach, and then we would break down into small groups, and we would do what we called a round robin. And I don't know if that's what you do or
Hmm.
not, where we just go around the circle. So that would happen every week. Um,
And where would the active listening happen in the round
in the
robin?
round robin. That was
Somebody
what,
would speak, and who is doing the listening?
and then the next person would listen.
Oh, I see. Okay, that's how
And
you.
then that person would
I
speak, and the
see.
next
Uh-huh.
person would
Okay.
listen,
Uh-huh.
and then that person and the
Okay.
next
Uh-huh.
person would listen. So it would go around the circle. Jenlin did that in his classes as well. It didn't matter what the classes were, he
Mm-hmm.
would teach listening in his classes. And from changes, we would go out because we were evangelists of it
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
and offer our whatever we knew to organizations and to staffs of organizations. And then we would do the round robin too. Uh, so that's how it was
Mm-hmm.
practiced
Okay.
in changes.
Mm-hmm.
And then changes went on from 1971 to 76, 77, 78 in Chicago, and people left Chicago. There were students at the university, that was the core of it, and then they left and went elsewhere. So there are changes here and there, but that movement hasn't sustained
Yeah,
itself.
the empathy circle is very similar, except it's usually it's four, maybe five people in a circle. You have the active, I mean, the speaker, and then they select their listener. So it's not like just in a circle, but since we're doing it online, you say, well, I'll select, Sam to be my listener. And then you have timed turns, usually up to like 5 minutes or so, just so it keeps going around, and then the listener reflects back until the speaker feels heard to their satisfaction. Then it becomes the listener's turn to be a speaker, and then they select their listener, and it just kind of shifts like that for the time allotted. So there's a real overlap with the changes, with that
Yeah,
structure
yes.
of making it a group event and everybody's equal versus the client therapist, sort of the framework. And yeah, I had, I just wonder what kind of happened with that, that it didn't take off more with changes, kind of spread to, uh, as a practice. That's what we're trying to do, is kind of to spread the practice as widely as possible. And then we also have a facilitator training. So we have like a 4 or 5 week session where you learn how to facilitate. And there's all kinds of challenges of, especially for new people who are learning to facilitate a circle, because when you have new people, instead of just reflecting back their understanding, they're putting in their own ideas or wanting to share, and just so you have a space to learn how to become a facilitator. And then you take that training like 5 times, and then can become a trainer and then train others you know, to be able to become facilitators or do the training process. So yeah, it's like creating a whole kind of a structure for that, as well as having the intention that we want to create a culture of empathy, which is to make this empathic, this way of being that Rogers called, empathic. If you know that paper, it was a
I do.
seminal paper on an empathic and unappreciated way of being.
Yes,
We make this a cultural norm,
yes, yes.
and the thing with the empathy circle, I think it could really spread widely if we get high profile people. If you had like Trump and Biden, or any of these politicians who would do an empathy circle instead of a debate, millions of people could see that, and the practice could spread, very quickly if we can kind of scale it up like that. So that's what we're looking at, is how do we scale this up?
Yeah, yeah, yes. You have something that you know that is working, and the problem with it, or the challenge with it, is how to then make this. What do you do to spread this thing
Hmm.
that you know that is working? Empathy circles. How does how what do you do? How can you scale that?
Yeah,
Is the words that you used.
right.
How do you spread it? How can it become a part of the culture? But it's the really in the scaling of it that you're talking about. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. And maybe your thought is maybe it is leaders. If you could get high profile leaders, that would be one way. That's what you're
hmm
toying with or teasing
Well,
out.
being open, being innovative about all kinds of different ways.
Yes.
This is just one possible
Uh-huh.
way. And your
Yes.
book
Yeah.
is like a contribution to that
Yes.
too,
Yes.
right? It's like, well, here's a whole body of work that kind of explains how this practice works.
Yes. Now I just have to, I'm sorry. I've got a
No
phone
problem.
here. I'm going to decline that. Okay. I don't know if you could hear that, but it was in my ears
hmm
there. Yeah. Yes. You're saying as well, you're not committed to this being the only way. The question is how this is one way, but how what are other ways? Uh,
Yeah. And your book is one,
and yes,
yeah.
yes. And my
So,
book, along with many others, my book is one. Yeah. Yes. Yeah. And I haven't thought about that
mm-hmm,
very much. My emphasis has just been get this out there,
mm-hmm.
pass along what I know. My experience was wonderful and unique and very special. I was privileged to work with Jenlin, and so I wanted to pass along what I knew. Uh,
So you have a lot
I
of learnings that you've developed over the years, and you're just wanting to really focus on sharing all those learnings and insights.
and have them in a form that is passed along because I do workshops. Uh, I have done workshops in the United States, yes, and Canada and Europe, uh, in which I, and they're very intensive workshops. They're 3 or 4 days,
Hmm.
and it's only with a small group of people. 12 people is a maximum there, in which now there's another thing here. I have to wait through this. I just shut off my audio for a minute. I haven't turned off my speaker in the background for my landline. Now it's off. Uh, in which I want to show people how to do this. And in my workshops, what I do is have each person be a speaker and a listener, as you do as well, for a short period of time, 8, 10 minutes or so.
Mm-hmm.
And I sit right alongside the listener and I coach them in doing it as they are doing it. And then afterwards, and I really learned this in changes because we would do this there too. Then I listen to the listener to find out what their experience was in doing this. And then I add
Mm-hmm.
my comments, if I have
Oh,
any
mm-hmm.
comments, to them. And then I open it up to the rest of the group to comment on the process. Uh, and each turn takes about 45 minutes or so with a person. And so that's my way of,
Mm-hmm.
I have
Mm-hmm.
been
Mm-hmm.
doing that, but it's just me. So my book is hopeful, it was an intention to put all of this together and see if I could be persuasive and influential to more than just those people
Have
who are in
you
my
So let
workshops.
me see if I understand it.
Yeah,
So
yeah, yeah,
you
please.
have a speaker and an active listener, and
Yes,
then the active listener just reflects back what the
yes,
speaker is saying, and
yes,
then you're doing that for 8 minutes, 10 minutes or so,
yes,
and then you're sitting next to them, kind of coaching them in case
yes,
that they're not doing it properly. You might say, just reflect back, don't,
yes,
add your own material,
yes,
or you're really helping them and that. Then you have a period where you're commenting on afterwards on your thoughts about it, and then you're getting comments from the audience as well. So it's
yes,
quite
yes,
a deep dive into
yes.
for the listener.
And one more there is that when we get through with the listener, when the listener's turn is over with the speaker, I spend almost as much time with the listener.
All right. Uh-huh.
I ask the listener, so how was this for you?
Do you ask the speaker how it was for them too?
I do
Or
not. And
uh-huh.
the reason that I don't, although I could, is I say when the whole group then, when we turn it open to the comments to the whole group, I say there will be no questions to the speaker here because their process continues even after they've been listened to. So they're still, much of the time, they're still in it. And I don't want to interrupt that process with questions from you to them. I say, now they're free to speak if they want to speak, but the questions that I want are about the process, and the comments that I want are about the process of listening that you heard. So that now in changes, we would ask the speaker how it was for them, but I've come to realize that people do a deep dive in this when they're speaking. And then so we stop at the end of 8 minutes or 9 minutes or 10 minutes, or it may go on for 12 minutes or 15 minutes, but we do find a stopping place for it. And they're still right there with it. So, and I don't want to interrupt that. I want to
Mm.
respect that. So that's why I don't do the asking of the speaker. Much of the time in the large group when they're commenting, about half of the time the speaker does comment on how it was for them.
Mm.
Yeah.
Have you recorded any of these? Because it'd be interesting to see the process maybe on Zoom or something where
I
you
have, and
hmm
I haven't put it on
hmm
Zoom yet, and I'm attempting to. I
hmm
mean, I've got a couple, I've never had a whole workshop recorded, which I would really like to do the whole 4 days so I could select things out from it and show that. But I have had some, an hour long or 2 hour session. It usually takes at least 2 hours to for me to do that, that I would like to upload
Oh,
onto
okay.
a
So you
YouTube.
recorded them, but you haven't uploaded them to YouTube
Right.
yet.
Yeah.
Okay. It'd
Yeah.
be interesting to see. I'd love to see that.
Yes, yes, yeah.
hmm
Yeah, I could actually make that available to you.
hmm
I think I could. I have to check with the people because
All
I
right.
have one that I've done recently, a month ago,
hmm
that was recorded by a professional videographer, um, that I haven't looked at sufficiently to decide whether I want to upload that. Yeah.
mm
Yes. Uh-huh.
So what are other?
But it
Okay.
is
Right.
I'm trying to do the same thing
hmm
as you're
hmm
doing. Exactly. Is and I think that let me see, I was going to say something else there too, but I may have interrupted you
Oh
just
no,
right now.
I was just following your thread. Go
Oh,
ahead.
yeah, yeah. That the reason this hasn't spread
Oh.
is maybe because there hasn't been a structure like you provide where you can say empathy circle and empathy circle is this,
hmm
whereas I just teach individuals and hope that this will spread by the teaching of individuals. And now with my book and with other books that are out there, I hope that. But that's very different than having a set program, so to speak.
hmm Well, I think it's very scalable.
Mhm.
It's, and the other thing we want to do is create chapter based. We have the Empathy Center as a 501(c)(3), and we want to create like a chapter based organization. We have like, here in the Bay Area, we have a group. There's a group in Phoenix and in Santa Barbara. And, people hold empathy circles all over. And we actually have an empathy summit, which we've been having it. People who have done the empathy circle, they can give like a 10-minute presentation about the experience or some aspect of the experience. And then we also frame it in a bigger picture. Our intention is to create a culture of empathy. So it's that social transformation that you were talking about. That kind of like consciously thinking about the the big picture that if we can get politicians to be doing empathy circles instead of debates, it's just going to create better connection. And we've had, when we were in Santa Barbara, we actually were doing, had weekly empathy cafes there. And we had a candidate, a Republican candidate for Congress, come and take part. And when he said, "Hey, this is great. I want to do empathy circles with my liberal friends or others too." So, and then you've got a structure that you can sort of implement. You just, even once you've are familiar with the empathy circle practice, you don't even need a facilitator, just someone to keep time and stuff. So it seems like it's a scalable practice, So it is, yeah, just one way to kind of get the kind of make that cultural shift. Because it seems like we certainly need it. The culture is just getting more and more polarized, more and more extreme. And I think what we're doing is really sort of an antidote. I mean, both of us, what we're trying to do is an antidote to the cultural, dysfunction or whatever you want to call it.
Yeah, yes. Yeah, just off the top of my head, thinking with you on this, uh, the what I'm liking about your empathy circle and what I was just saying is that you've got a structure here. You've got a thing that you can say, oh, well, let's do an empathy circle in which people are empathizing
Hmm.
with each other. That um, it isn't, so it's identifiable in that
Hmm.
way. Whereas empathizing is not identifiable, doesn't have uh,
A clear
people,
structure or
yeah, people don't
group. Hmm.
know it.
Hmm.
My attempt was trying to say, look, this thing is out here, and it makes a difference, and you can do it.
Hmm.
And here's how you can do it.
Uh-huh.
And people change when you do it. That's what my kind of the structure of my book forward. But it still doesn't have a name or like
Hmm.
yours does, or a set way of doing it. Uh,
And the cultural shift, I think that's the other part is to have
yeah.
that intention, that vision. So
Yes. Yes.
we've got the structure, we've got
Yeah.
the vision, and we've
Yes.
got the tools, and so it becomes more of a structure. And you seem like a very structured framework kind of person. Maybe if I don't know, that's my just impression that you think of structures and systems and
Yeah, and not necessarily, I
no,
don't,
okay.
but I do, but I'm in there. I mean, you
Mm-hmm.
got it right. It's just that the language is a little bit different. I'm thinking of when you say the cultural change, there I'm with you exactly,
Mm-hmm.
because that's exactly what had me started with it. Calling it community psychology doesn't really do it. I want this to be a part of society as a way of being that people have and are with each other. Yeah. So in that way, I am, and I resonate exactly with
Mm-hmm.
what
Okay.
you were saying. Yes.
I can say for as an
Hmm.
example, like I mean, just how that cultural
Yes.
aspect happens is, I mean, just somebody reported, oh, I was in an empathy circle, they've been doing the training, and then they're traveling with their son to, around California somewhere, and they're in the car, and he starts talking about, their family, and she gets defensive and starts, "Oh no, you're not right," and then he says, "Oh, forget it, you're right," just kind of acquiescing, and but in a way that, yeah, you're always, so critical of her, kind of being critical of him or being defensive. And then she thinks, oh, I know this active listening, this empathic listening process. Maybe I should be trying that. So she starts reflecting back, oh, so this is what your experience is with the family. And then he says, yeah, that's right. And then he starts sharing more. And she says, oh, and that's what, so she starts going into the empathic listening to what he has to say. And it kind of opened up him, and then and she didn't say I'm doing active listening, she just did it. And then she said, oh, the whole rest of the day was really great, we just had this really great relationship. We're listening to each other, and so this is the cultural impact, how it impacts the individual interrelational, the interactions, during the day that we have with people.
I'm totally in agreement with that. And and that is what I'm hoping will happen when people do it. And that's the report of people too. Uh, and what I was puzzling over with you, with expanding or scaling it up or making this as a part of cultural change, was uh, well, I actually haven't thought about that for a long time. I mean, my focus has been just on getting the book out, as well as doing the workshops that I do in the hope that it would spread. I do a group twice a month. It's a drop-in group online, and in which I teach. And then we break up into breakout groups on Zoom, and everybody practices.
Mm-hmm.
And my thought has been, uh, some people have been with me a long time. Uh, there's only one person from that group now who has said, I'm going to start one too. And
Mm-hmm.
I've been trying to think, everybody is learning this and it's going on in their life. And I have a time each week for people to tell me their stories. So I know they're doing it. So it's spreading in that way. Uh, but I'd also like to be teaching teachers who are
Right.
teaching
Mm-hmm.
teachers who are teaching teachers and for this to be going on. And I haven't figured out how to do that yet
Well,
at all.
Marshall Rosenberg seems to have done that with nonviolent communication. So that's kind of spread where there's people have picked it up and they're teaching it all over the place. So,
Yes, yes. I'm a senior member of that group.
mhm.
Uh, I met Marshall in 1972. Um, but I already knew empathic listening when I met Marshall. Marshall was a student you may know
Mm-hmm.
of Rogers at the University of Wisconsin. Yes, he's doing it all over. Yeah, and people are getting it from that. Uh, and they're getting a particular kind of way of doing empathy, so that I have some objections to it because it has been talked about as in NVC circles, which I'm trying to change, as offering empathy. And
Mm-hmm.
I don't like that because that makes it a thing as opposed to a way of relating or a way of being. So but nonetheless, that's better than nothing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I understand. I have some discomfort with NBC too. There's, it would take a while to sort of unpack that. Um, yeah. Uh,
Your discomfort.
yeah.
Yeah.
With NBC, kind of like, I don't know. There was one. I guess it's just to focus on with the empathy circle. It seems easier. It's just come in, listen to each other, learn empathic listening, this way of being. And with NVC, it's just the feelings and needs become so predominant that somehow it sort of it's so it seems more complicated. And whereas we're with the empathy circle, it's very easy access to it, and you don't need a lot of training. You don't have to learn a whole sort of a philosophy of feelings, needs, and the concepts of feelings and the needs behind it. I think are helpful, but and then there's another aspect. I'm not so maybe has some thoughts that we have in the culture. The political left, the farther left, went into sort of this woke culture stuff, which seems to me rather authoritarian. And I've seen that parts of NBC has kind of gone into that too, in that direction. So they've picked up on politically leftist ideology and go into anti-racism, anti-this. And my thing is you want to empathize with racism, you want to empathize with authoritarianism. So sort of the means are the end versus that they're the enemy and we have to something. So and so there's just subtle differences there. and I've actually mediated conflicts within the NVC community where people are objecting to the woke, and then there's sort of this kind of in a space where they can talk about the issues. And so anyway, those are just some concerns that I have about, and it tends to can be very intellectual somehow. So I don't know what your thoughts are. I mean, you were there, you've seen the whole trajectory of that movement.
Well, there is a divide in NVC now as to what NVC is. And the divide happened after Marshall died, when people with some trainers with a particular emphasis upon social justice
Hmm.
introduced ideas that those of us uh, who were trained by Marshall um, object to as not being part of NVC. Uh, and those ideas have been influential because almost everybody in NVC is left
Hmm.
politically. Those ideas were very persuasive, so a lot of trainers have adopted those ideas. And then there's this other group of us who are older and who were specifically with Marshall, who now object to any of that being a part of NVC and see that as
Hmm.
actually counter to NVC. So that's a conflict that's going on right now within NVC.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, and I know it extremely well,
Okay.
and we're trying to resolve it. Um, and the group then, and there's a lot more that I could say about that, which I don't necessarily want to do at this moment. But it the bylaws were changed to allow all members to be able to vote on this, and the people who were in the social justice uh, were able to persuade enough people to vote for a board of directors, which was aligned with woke and with those
Hmm.
ideas. So now the struggle is to how do we do this? And will they talk to us? And will we talk to each other? My idea for it to resolve this is to have every NVC trainer who is against this talk to another trainer who is for it, using our process
Hmm.
to see whether until we come to a resolution, whatever that resolution is. But that hasn't been adopted
We're
yet.
totally in alignment. I guess I'm in the camp
Oh
that
yeah, yeah,
you
yeah,
are because I've
yeah.
seen, and we've done, we've also done what we call the empathy tent. I don't know if you saw any of that empathy tent
Yes,
work.
yes.
We've been out in public spaces. So we have the political right would come to Berkeley and they're demonstrating for free speech. And then the political left comes out and they counter demonstrate. And there's only like four of us in an empathy tent holding that space that you're valuing and I'm valuing, and we're saying we're willing to listen to you on the political right, we're willing to listen to you on the political left, and how about we'll support you in dialoguing in an empathy circle about whatever these issues. And we've had people, there's was a documentary called Trump Phobia, What Both Sides Fear, and the filmmaker saw our work here in Berkeley at one of these rallies, and she invited us to LA where there was an impeached Trump rally, and during the day, I mediated six pairs of people from, one person from the right, one from the left, sitting down in the empathy tent, doing empathic listening. I would first I would listen to both sides. Then once they sort of got the hang of it, I'd ask them to do active listening, empathic listening with each other. And we'd go for, 45 minutes or an hour. And at the end of the six pairs I mediated, five of them gave each other hugs. So it's like that is the power of what we're talking about, and it's empathizing with the woke or but also empathizing with the others, and kind of holding that space. But it's a sensitive space, right? It's not an easy space to hold and to even understand, I think, for a lot of people. But it's kind of like the space. I think that's the solution to the polarization that we have in the country or in the families or everywhere else.
Yeah, yeah, yes, yeah. I'm in 100, yes, in complete agreement. Yes.
Yeah.
And the focus, and I also want to make this comment about nonviolent communication too. It has become feelings and needs. That isn't, I surprise people um, who are new to NVC, new trainers, even in the last 20 years, by saying, I knew Marshall before he had the concept of needs. There was an NVC before needs. Now, what is that? If needs wasn't there, how could there be NVC? And uh, so, what I wanted to say to you is when I teach empathy, and I do it with when I go to Europe, it is with NVC trainers that I'm doing empathy, and I say I don't do feelings and needs.
Hmm. Hmm. So
Because
Rosenberg was not using, I mean, he had a form of NVC before. And I imagine it was based on just active listening or,
yes, 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 that sometimes the concept of needs is very helpful. But to be listening only for needs to that category of it, you miss what is going on with the person because you're always translating. And then the being with the other person uh, never happens. So I'm trying to also say that
hmm.
those concepts we're pointing to with Marshall, we're pointing to the kind of deeper space that one gets into when you empathize with somebody.
Yeah, that's why with the empathy circle, we say just speak from any part of your body. There's no, it's just whatever the person says, they can be judgmental, they can be anything, they can talk about their feelings, they can talk, then all you do is listen and stay with them with the sense that as people feel develop more trust in being heard, they kind of open up more. And that listening, that active listening, that empathic listening is just going to open it up and the relationship will get deeper just sort of naturally, as well as you observe, since you're in a group of 4 or 5 people, you're observing, you're learning from the others how they're doing it and seeing what's happening. So it's very few rules except staying within that structure.
I love it. I love it.
Yeah.
Yes, and it makes perfect sense. I mean, it is in completely alignment with, or that's exactly what I'm hoping
Yeah.
happens. Yeah,
Yeah, it's so
yeah,
interesting your experience with NBC because I've seen it from a different angle where I did, as I mentioned, actually had some people who were sort of
yeah.
objecting to the woke and we sort of dialogued about that and I'm seeing it pop up kind of all over it. And I think to I don't know what we even call sort of just the empathic way of being approach is like needing vocabulary, right? How to describe it is which is what you're trying to do. Um, because I'm getting a bit more conscious about writing about how to address these issues, to be more, to explain them. And I think the one thing we do have is the empathy circle is a minimal viable product practice, right? This is this is like the minimal basic structure that we anybody can sort of use and take part in and then invite the different parties in the conflict into an empathy circle, which actually in terms of NBC, I don't know what you think about this, but even Marshall objected to the word and the term and nonviolent communication. He said, I don't really like it, but I kind of got stuck with it. And I thought like empathic listening would have been, a better term for what what it's about. So it's be clear that this is about empathy and empathic way of being. So might have helped to frame the that whole NBC, what's now NBC. So I don't know what you think about that.
Well, that's a different track, somewhat. or tact. Um, Marshall, how I got into NVC, well, let me think for a second. I want to see where I want to go with this. Uh, there is the there is a conscious way that one can attend to their experience when one is upset with the other person, which by oneself transforms the experience so that one is not then blaming or speaking critically or judgmentally to the other person. And that's one half of NVC is how do you do that?
Mm-hmm.
If I'm thinking you're a jerk, because you did this or that or something, or if I'm thinking with my wife, how self-centered it is of her to be doing that. And she's done this a million times now. How do I get out of that? Because there is a kind of prison that happens for myself so that I'm reacting out of that judgment. And what Marshall found was a way that I can uh, enter my own experience, which transforms that. And that's what he calls honesty, and which is one half of it. So that I can then do it and get out of the thing of, oh, she's doing that again.
Mm-hmm.
Well, let me see. What is it? What's happening with me there? And then I can speak to her in a way which isn't blaming or critical. So that's as important an aspect of nonviolent communication as is empathizing with it. So that saying that it would be an empathic way of being isn't doesn't cover that aspect. In fact, that's what Gordon found was that uh, Gordon left Rogers in order to spread this, just as you're doing. But it was particularly, what do you do? Because that wasn't in Rogers at all.
Mm-hmm.
What do you do when you're upset with the other person? How do you speak to them then in a way which is most conducive to their responding non-defensively? So that's what I would
Right. I
say
see
I would
that's
say
another
about that.
aspect to that.
Yes, yes.
How you are, how are you expressing yourself versus, putting it on the other person. You're just saying what your own experience, felt experience is, and that's going to sort of deepen. You're not putting it there to blame for whatever's happening. It's just this is what's happening in me, and you're kind of sharing that felt experience. And Rose and Marshall kind of focused on that as well as uh, Thomas Gordon, and then you've also write about that in your book too about bringing it to your own experience, and I would say that is part of the empathic way of being, right? It's like kind of being you can speak in an empathic way of being, which kind of helps, with getting to that deeper sense of an empathic way of being. It's like there's a big role for the speaker too to contribute to that.
And what is unknown, and I like what you're saying there. For me, uh, so I'm trying to write about this in the NBC network right now of what the difference is, what this divide is. That's a current thing. The phone call that I got interrupted with, just that I put off, is a meeting that I'm having with a colleague tomorrow, uh, in which we're going to talk about this. But what I'm saying is that you get to, and it happens with empathy, and of course you know that, you get to what I'm going to call a deeper level of awareness, and you can feel it. And we don't have language for that. So since we don't have language for it, it isn't recognized or held up or appreciated. Uh, all that you just said there about the empathic way also works for oneself because when you're there, you speak differently.
Hmm.
You do the thing that you're saying. And I'm saying empathy creates that because people go deeper. They they speak angrily, judgmentally to begin with, and then the empathy does the thing that you're saying. I loved it, what you were saying before, that it opens their own feelings open, their own expands. And the way that they talk is no longer blaming or judgmental. They are talking about their own experience. And when they talk about their own experience, then it makes it available, that the availability of the other to hear it increases dramatically.
And the
Yeah.
relationship becomes deeper
And
too. It's
deeper. Yeah,
yeah.
yeah, 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 yes, yes. Yeah, yeah. So how to say that, how to promulgate that,
Mm.
how to disseminate that, how to bring recognition to it. That's what I'm attempting to do,
Yeah.
and what I'm seeing as a common
Hmm.
challenge
Right.
now with us, with what you're
Yeah.
doing and with what I and many, many other people are doing too.
Yeah. And just well, I guess I just see the empathy circle. I've kind of focused on the empathy circle as
Yeah,
a
yeah,
starting point, as a
yes.
and it's like sort of the minimal viable for me, like
Mhm.
practice that from here we can just keep improving, finding other practices and other ways of doing it. And if everybody just learned empathic listening or how to take part in an empathy circle, if all 8 billion people just had that one skill, it'd be a big step, in the right direction is kind of what I'm seeing. And so yeah, and so always looking at how to kind of build and have I don't know if we think about a movement because we think in terms of movement building. Do we want to build a movement for this and be a bit more conscious about having a movement to and maybe people are more open to it now too because of the political kind of chaos that's sort of happening. So I'm just sort of thinking. I don't know if you.
Yeah, well, I'm being stimulated by what you're saying too.
Mhm.
So here's my thoughts. May I? Is that,
Oh yeah, please.
yeah,
Yeah.
okay. See, uh, now where were you, what you were just going with that, and what I was thinking was empathy is interpreted by many people, including people who are critical of empathy, as being soft, as being, and empathy gets understood as agreeing, uh, that you don't have anything different than, that you give over to the other person. It's being it's being understood as acquiescing.
Hmm.
Uh, so that has to be countered in some way. And what was just coming to me was how to put words to, how to say that something different happens when you empathize between the people. That's the thing. The idea that I'm having right now is
Hmm.
that that's the thing to say and to broadcast in some way.
So you want to say there's something that's happening between people. There's a quality or something that's happening between people when they empathize and have a word, a term for that, a way of conveying that
A way of
experience.
conveying that, and even if not a word or something, to to broadcast that something different happens when people empathize with another. They're both changed. It's
So
like
yeah,
it's the thing. It's your experience with the six people.
yeah. So there's a change that's happening when
It
you
is a change.
empathize.
Yes.
There's a
Uh-huh.
change that happens in the relationship.
Yes. Yeah.
Uh,
Uh-huh. In both people, with both people. So empathy is not, it is not, empathizing is not acquiescing. Empathizing is not agreeing. Empathizing is changing what happens between people.
mhm. So you want to, people are thinking that empathy is sort of acquiescing or agreeing with people. And you're saying it's not about that. It's about the quality of the relationship that between people is that's there's a change that happens there and kind of trying to find the language to kind of express
Yes,
that
yes,
quality.
yeah, 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 yes, yeah. And it isn't exactly the change in the relationship, although that's
Okay.
correct. That's correct, without a doubt. It is that uh, how to find words for how to say this that uh, yeah, it's well, I mean, you did say it. You did say it. It's the but it doesn't just confine to the relationship. The relationship changes is that people change.
Mm-hmm. So it's like more than the relationship. It's
Yes,
like
yes,
deeper. It's
yes,
about the way people change in this state. There's a change that happens. You're trying to like address, name
yes,
that change.
yes, yes. And the change that happens is that people, and then that's where the words are don't have words. People expand. People are people are in people are increased. People are how do you say that it carries over and when somebody listens to it, the example you gave of somebody listening in the car earlier,
Hmm.
their whole day changes.
Yeah. Like how do you kind of name that change that happens in the quality? I don't know. And
Yes, yes, yes. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
yeah. So what are the words for? Describe. It's like you're kind of at the edge of trying to
Yes, yeah,
find
yeah,
the word for it,
yes,
and it's not quite there. But you've got the experience, but
yes,
you don't have the word to sort of describe the experience. It's almost like a I don't know mystical
yes,
experience
yes, yes,
or
yes,
a communion or
yes,
something
yes.
like
Yes,
a.
it's a mystical experience, but we
Mhm.
don't want to call it a mystical experience.
Mystical might be too
Yeah,
woo-woo for
yeah, it's
people.
too airy-fairy or some
Mhm,
or puts off. But
mhm.
there is something dramatically different happens that you can feel, and it stays with you and changes you and changes how you are.
Well, is it a changing of the feeling? Like your feelings change, and those changed feelings stay with you. So
Yes,
it's kind of
yes,
like naming the feelings. If you have a palette of feelings that kind of like openness, a
yes, yes, yes,
warmth,
yes, yes, yes,
a
yes,
soul opening. So the
yes,
soul is opening to each other. It's
yes,
like something.
yeah, yeah, yes, yeah, yeah. Without saying it's a change in feelings,
Hmm.
because then
Oh,
we're into thing vocabulary.
oh, uh-huh. Oh, uh-huh. So you're trying to transcend the feelings, even that there's
Yeah,
even a
yes, yeah,
higher for
yeah.
quality.
And when you said that you're more open and you're more alive, so that's why I was trying to go on with the book is
Hmm.
and the title of the book too. When I listen, people speak and come alive.
Hmm.
It's whatever aliveness is that happens as people are more alive. And maybe that's the word to focus on. I'm
Hmm.
brainstorming here with
Yeah,
an
just you're alive. You're just feeling more alive.
more alive,
Mhm.
more vitality, more energy, but maybe just the more alive.
Well, right, Rosenberg like that, didn't he? What's alive in you, or didn't he use that word a bunch?
He
Or
uses that, yes. Uh, and he means it in exactly the way that I'm using
hmm.
it right now. So, because that was one of the questions, you ask what's alive for you. But that's a little bit different than the way that I'm using it. You become more alive, is
Hmm.
what I'm saying. And that might be a point to use it to point to it, that when people empathize, they are different, they are changed in the empathizing, they are more connected, they're and each of them are more alive after the empathizing.
Just sort of sitting with that space.
Yeah, yeah.
What's in that space of
Yes, yeah, yeah, yeah.
what
Hmm. Yeah,
where there is sort of an openness, like I can
yeah.
just feel sort of an openness and
Hmm.
versus, sort of the mind, not if
Right.
the other part is more of a constriction feeling, right? For every
Yes,
day, there's the feeling of constriction, all the stuff that needs to be done. And then there's, yeah, those are some of the experiences. And there's sort of a healthiness to it too. Feels
yes, yeah,
like healthy and um,
yes. I
uh,
found the word salubrious,
salubrious.
salubrious,
Haven't
and I
heard
was
that.
going to call that,
Hmm.
and it means the meaning of it is more beneficial, healthy, beneficial.
Hmm.
That's the meaning of the word. And I was wanting to expand that, but nobody knows what salubrious means. So I took it out of my book. I think I use
Hmm.
it once to describe this. But yeah, there's a healthy, yeah, yeah,
So we're kind of shifting a little bit.
yeah,
Where are you going next with I mean you with your work? You're doing workshops. You've got your book out now. You're
yeah.
uh-huh.
Well, I'm finding that I have to market because I
Hmm.
self-published. So now it's two people immediately asked if they could translate it. One into Mandarin, Chinese, and one into Dutch. And then another has come forth who wants to translate it into Japanese. And uh, and so I'm thinking I need to make a Kindle version of it. And then maybe I need to read it to do an
That'd be
audio,
nice. Uh-huh.
uh, which is you suggested that too. Um, People who have been in my workshops can read my book and they can hear it because they know what I am saying. So I'm thinking of that I need to put a YouTube out of my doing a workshop so that they can hear my voice just as I'm speaking to you now and how I talk. And that may help them actually read the book
Mm-hmm.
um, to hear how I express things and how I say things. So I'm thinking of doing that. So that's where my emphasis is right now is how do I get this out there more, my book out there more into different languages. And I haven't embraced yet because it's still new to me, the how do I join with other people who are doing it like you to expand it. Um, so that's where
Mm-hmm.
I am
Hmm.
presently
Yeah,
with it.
I did a YouTube search and I saw a few things from you, but there wasn't a lot
No,
on YouTube. There was something so you'd been interviewed about your experiences with Marshall Rosenberg, I
yes.
think, and that was the main thing. So
That was it. So now
yeah.
that I've got to get this other out
Hmm.
there. Yeah.
Yeah, like your workshops, having some of those out there would be good. I mean, I would love to see it, like how
Yeah.
they're
Yeah.
always looking for ideas and
Yes. And that may be the first thing because well, that'll be right there at the top of my list is that this one was it was recorded that I did in March and it's 2 hours. So I might put that up. I have to get permission from everybody. I have to look at the whole thing to see if
hmm
I like it, for one. And then I record my Monday night meetings as well, the drop-in thing that goes on twice a week or twice a month. And I've also thought of putting one of those up. Uh, it's not 2 hours. The whole meeting is 2 hours, but when people go into breakouts, then those are not recorded. So it is an hour, hour and a half or so of me talking, and I do a demonstration almost each time. I have about 18 people who are coming to those.
Mm-hmm.
Used to be a group of about eight or so, but it's expanded. So that's what I'm puzzling over
Mm-hmm.
now, is what's the best way to use my energy now.
There's
I'm
also
eight.
doing these dialogues, just recording. We can long form, you just
Yes, yes,
expanded exploration like we're doing.
yes, yes, yeah,
And nowadays with AI actually will harvest this and
yes.
it'll go into the public record too, that when people do an AI search, it'll actually reference what
Oh,
we're,
wonderful,
yeah.
wonderful. And I mean, doing this with you and you post some of this or all of this
I
or
put it on
whatever,
YouTube. I'll put the whole thing on YouTube and then I
wonderful.
put it on, my website and I put it
Yeah,
on my LinkedIn and on my Facebook pages. So yeah, I spread it all over.
yeah, yes, yes, yes. And I'm hoping to if I can get my book into uh, other people's hands that who will interview me
Hmm.
to I had this wonderful thing with a an interaction with uh, a local anchor at CBS, uh, LA anchor, who I used in my book. I used examples of her because she does it when she interviews people. She
Hmm.
wasn't an anchor at that time. She was a national correspondent. So I contacted her and I said, uh, Jamie Yukas is her name. And she's now a CBS local, LA local anchor in the morning. I said, Jamie, how did you learn this? Did you learn it from Rogers? Because that's how I imagined everybody learned. And she said, no, I learned it from by necessity growing up in my family. It was a defensive thing that I learned how to do. And so then I asked her when I published the book, I asked her if she would be interested in reading it. And she said yes. And she gave me her home address, and I sent her a copy of it, as I did with you too. Could I get an interview would she be up for an interview at some point?
Hmm.
That's the kind of thing that I'm
Right.
hoping for. A
Hmm.
single interview there, then that really goes a long way.
Yeah, there's also a book club. I've done book clubs, Empathy Circle book clubs. Somebody reads a chapter and then you have a discussion about, we would do an empathy circle on the top of the, we did that with William Miller's book. I think we did one, you'd read a chapter and then we had an empathy circle to discuss it. And then the next chapter the next week. And we've also done it with some other books, a couple other books too, using the empathy circle as the discussion
That's a
process.
wonderful idea. I know of at least one book group who are reading my book, and maybe another one is starting. But I
Hmm.
hadn't had the idea
Hmm.
of my coming in then or after a chapter and doing or and doing an empathy circle with it.
Yeah, we'd be glad to help you with setting that up. We just were part of the seventh international, they have conference, empathy conference, and they were interested in the empathy circle practice. So it was an all day conference, but they had an hour and a half for doing the empathy circle. And I just put out a call to our facilitators, and we had, you know, 12, 15 facilitators come so we could break into breakout rooms and hold, circles. So, our group is always glad to kind of help, kind
Wow.
of, it's nice to have a facilitator the first couple times, but then once you do it, you don't need, everybody knows
Right,
how to
right.
do it, and
Yeah,
you just need
yes.
a timekeeper. And
Yes.
And it's so with Zoom, it's so easy to record. So you can record a whole series, right? You just hit the record button and it's easy to upload it to YouTube. So
I
yeah,
like the idea.
glad to help out in any way like
Thank
that
you.
to
Thank you. Yes.
if your group is interested in doing some empathy circles to see how it works or even train them to we have in July we have it's a free or by donation online 4-week training too. It's really that's it. And we're also doing maybe you'd like to speak in October 4th, we have the Empathy Summit, and it's the topic is how do we build an empathy movement? So I'd like to get people just, for 15 minutes, 10, 15 minutes, you just talk about your ideas of what we can do to build a movement. And I'm just trying to get people to think in those terms of movement building, to say there's a bigger picture here, and we need to be thinking of the organizational structures to, create, make sort of a cultural transformation. So I can email you that just here.
You did originally, and I hadn't
Oh,
responded to it yet because I
okay.
was waiting for this to happen, but I'd be glad
Mhm.
to participate in that in October.
Oh, great.
Yes.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we'll keep in touch
Okay.
regarding that because that is my whole thing has been with my book right now, but it is toward what you're saying.
Hmm.
And to
Yeah.
do the brainstorming about developing, and we could call that an empathy culture. Maybe that's the
Hmm.
word to
That's what we
use.
call, yeah, culture of empathy is
Yeah,
just
yeah,
where it's just empathy, mutual, making it's mutual empathy is just a core cultural value. It's like, oh, of course, the country it has mutual empathy. I do see it as the way out of this polarization, that we've got in the country. So, and
yeah, yeah.
maybe now because I think there's sort of a space open maybe for new, I mean, sort of philosophically, it's that the political left has sort of dominated the cultural space for the past, decade or so. And now with the right kind of bashing them, that there's sort of this like, what do we do now? Right?
Right.
That this is how about trying this? How about trying to bring all the sides together to have dialogue,
Yeah, yes,
using
yes,
empathy. So
yes.
maybe there's a space and openness for this now.
So, I had this wonderful trip to Washington, D.C. in at the end of September. Our son, uh, we married late in life, so our son is just in his 30s right now, and went to high school in Chicago where civics is no longer taught. So I said, we need to have a week and go to Washington, D.C. And we did. And it was a wonderful experience. So we went to the White House and we went to the Congress and we went to the memorials and we sat in the Senate while they were debating and voting on extending the debt limit. This was in
Hmm.
September. And it was incredibly exciting to see them do that. But what's coming to my mind, that's a background for they talk to each other sometimes. Now, who could I get in the Senate? Who could we get in the Senate available to learn how to do this and then introduce it among senators? I'm
That would be
brainstorming.
great. No, no, this is great. I love this
Yeah.
brainstorm because I've thought
Yeah.
about that too. In
Yeah.
fact,
Yeah. Yes.
I'm
Yes.
thinking in terms of we create a chapter-based empathy movement. There's chapters
Yeah.
using these practices,
Hmm.
and and they can each have an empathy tent, so you can set up local listening in your community,
Yes.
and then also
Uh-huh.
we build momentum, and then we go to the Capitol Mall and we set up the empathy tents, and we say we want a bill that senators and representatives have to have a monthly empathy circle with the other side to talk about how to bridge the divide, for
Yeah. Yes.
example,
Yes.
right? So
Yeah.
that and then And I've also, we have the governor here of California, Gavin Newsom. So when he was running for office, I met him at one of the functions. And I said, Gavin, would you do an empathy circle with John Cox, who is the candidate? And he says, John Cox, the Republican candidate, he says, John Cox has no empathy.
Right.
And I said, well, if he would do it, would you take part in an empathy circle? He said, oh, he wouldn't take part. And I said, well, what if I did get him, to take part in one? Would you do it? And he kind of hemmed and hawed. And I did reach out to the other side, and it was right at almost the election time, and he was willing to do it, and then it was just not enough time to really get an empathy circle going. So it's like that. And I had thought of, we have taken our empathy tent to the state capitol and set up on the capitol, lawn, and done empathy circles and stuff. So if we could get like the governor or, even the local, legislatures to take part somewhere to get it started, exactly what you're saying. And if you have a contact in the Senate, that would be great because in when Barack Obama uh, he talked about empathy, a lot in his campaign, and he said that he would choose a Supreme Court justice who had all these skills and was empathic, and it just a whole shitstorm kind of got started in the Senate, and it was a whole debate about empathy, and Jeff Sessions was sort of leading this anti-empathy,
Yes.
campaign
Yes.
because they're confusing it with sympathy, feeling
Right.
sorry for people.
Yes. Yes.
And the whole debate was like they're talking past each other, and I find if Republicans or conservatives know what we're talking about, there's just everybody having a voice, everyone feeling heard. They're much more open to the practice. It's a total misunderstanding. So yeah, so if you have any contacts in the Senate, it would be great to, kind of get them involved. Because that's the kind of ideas we need, right? It's like how do we bring it into the political? And I ran for Congress as the empathy candidate here. If you go Edwin for Congress, .com, you'll see my campaign. And so I ran in the Bay Area. I got 3% of the vote. So
Wow.
yeah.
Wow.
So,
Wow.
and it was against establishment,
Yes. Yes.
candidates
Yeah. Yeah.
too.
What
So
district?
it was District 8.
Eight?
We had redistricting the last
Oh,
time, and it
yeah.
kind of opened up. What was the time before last? Actually, I think we. So, yeah. So
I've
anyway,
never thought of that. Yes.
mhm,
But I have a contact which I can't, I'm not free to disclose,
mhm,
and that I'm trying to make connections with. And so now that's putting that at the forefront of my mind too, that my intermediary, I want to contact the intermediary and see if I can give that person a boost
mhm.
to make the contact with the other person.
Yeah, it would be great. I
Yeah,
think
yeah,
that's what we need is just time to be thinking and strategizing
yeah,
and
yes,
brainstorming and see
yes.
where's the energy, how much time people have energy for taking on different projects and initiatives. So, I'm all for that. We do. So, uh, yeah, and so anyway, for doing, promoting your work and getting, I think these dialogues is good for to do more of them. I'm glad to, talk more in the future too, if you have like kind of
Eh,
specific areas, just to get the ideas, and the experiences is out there, and it's so easy to do now with Zoom.
with Zoom, yes, yeah, yes. I'm glad to. If things come up for in your mind as well,
Okay,
I'm glad to.
yeah.
Yeah.
Uh,
I think the thing well, it comes back to, I think what I want to point to and want to work on and want to offer uh, is what I'm now just going to call the mystery. Is the that something happens
mm-hmm.
when you empathize with another. That and the something happens that we don't have words for, in which people change and change in a way in which they're more, right now just say, more alive. And that isn't, it isn't, it is something that they feel. And because we don't have words for it, and it is something that we feel, it doesn't get recognized, but it happens every time. That's what I want to say too.
Yeah, so you're really wanting to focus on this aspect of naming the experience of what happens, and you're sort of just being in that space, kind of looking for the vocabulary and exploring
Yes, yeah, yeah, yeah,
that experience.
yes. I was meaning to say that's the thing that I think, one of the things that I contribute is attempting to bring awareness to that and to then uplift it so that
Hmm. Yeah,
uh,
so you bring your awareness to it, and then you can kind of uplift it and sort of.
if I can introduce that, if I can introduce that so that it becomes a thing. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
uh, and I don't mean it in the thing way, that so that it becomes real
Mm-hmm.
for more people, that, oh, the recognition, oh yeah, yes, this does happen. Oh, I've never had that before in my life. Or when it does happen, oh, this is different. And it isn't just subjective. It isn't just a soft feeling. It isn't just something that is a random occurrence. Uh, and oh, yes, I like it, but well, it happens. And no, it is something that is actually can be created and uh, instilled uh, in your life.
Yeah, so this experience is something you can instill in your life, and it doesn't just randomly happen. You can do it by using empathic listening,
Yes, yes,
and you have a choice, like,
yes.
to do this.
Yeah, 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 yes, yes. Mhm.
Well, one idea would be is how about we hold an empathy circle on that topic? So we have like a 2 hour, even a 3 hour empathy circle. And the whole question is what is the experience of what happens in the when in the empathy circle itself?
Let's do
So,
it.
okay, well we can. I'm glad to schedule it whenever you
Yeah,
want.
yeah, yeah,
Hmm. Because I've been thinking about that too. I even thought of doing like an empathy circle marathon, where it would be like an 8 hour empathy circle. You could go off, go to the bathroom and stuff,
right.
have your food, but it would be a constant exploration of what is happening in this space
Yes,
and describing it. And
yeah.
it could be recorded too.
Be
And
recorded. Put
and
that on
what is
YouTube.
happening, what is happening, and especially as longer as we do it, like into the third or fourth or fifth hour, what is happening in our awareness and our consciousness is like, how is that changing, and what are you experiencing now in the
Yeah,
present moment? And
yeah, yeah,
yeah.
yeah, yes.
Do you have a couple of people that might like to take part? I mean, it's easy to organize. We just set a date and time. I can invite people, or if you have some people you want to invite, we just
Sure,
do
I
it.
could do that. I have
I
to think
can.
about that, but yes,
We just need two or three more people, and and I can do the recording and technical stuff because I do a lot of it. So,
good.
and take part of the back end, uploading it and stuff.
Yes. And then I want to go to another idea.
Okay.
And the other, I mean, because what I would like to see as well is a recording of the two people who are opposites with the empathizing. The six that you talked about who were on the other side, and then we don't have to do all, it doesn't have to be all six, but to have visible two people with who are diametrically opposed to each other empathize and have that recorded, that would be a piece that for me would be
Mm-hmm. Okay.
very
Mm.
extremely valuable.
I do have a recording of a pro-life, pro-choice group, and so
Wow.
there is an empathy circle with that. But it could be, yeah, you can set up any of those. I had recorded too. There was a conflict in, I don't remember what group it was. But it was in Extinction Rebellion in Santa Cruz. So it was a group was in conflict with each other. So for conflict, for deeper conflict, I don't know if you're familiar with Restorative Circles by Dominic Barter. So we do restorative empathy circles. I kind of, sort of a modification where the people in all the people who were in the conflict, we did a pre-circle with them where I just listened to their conflict, and gave them 30 minutes up to an hour to talk about the conflict. Then we had an empathy circle where all the participants could come together and they used the empathy circle practice. And I recorded the pre-circles were all recorded, but they didn't want a recording of the circle itself. So that was another, yeah.
Yeah, yeah, yes, yes, yes. Right.
Mhm.
Yeah, yeah,
Oh, I know what I'm going to try to do is there's I just did I saw you looking at the time, but we're going for
yeah,
quite a while. Just if you're just let me know anytime you need to stop. I can
yeah,
usually
yes.
go for hours, so I have no limit. Is there was a an article about radical empathy in the Chicago Times. And I was writing about it, and he's talking actually about the woke, kind of that NBC. They're using empathy, bringing people into a woke culture, using empathy, and he's like kind of objecting to that, saying, it's shutting down free speech and so forth. And I hadn't heard so much about people actually doing that. And just a couple of days ago in that conference, I did hear someone who was taking that woke empathy radical empathy concept, using empathy well, if you empathize with people, you have to, address the victims of, some, and that's what empathy means is you have to take the side of the victims, and which is not what I see. But I wanted to bring some of those people together too, and also in the NVC community, if you know any of the people who are on that two sides of the views of empathy, the woke NVC and the other empathy based NVC, holding empathy circles with them if they're willing to have those recorded too would be.
Would be wonderful. And so I'm glad to know that. Um, yes.
Yeah, so I
I,
just offer that. We're glad.
yes,
So
yes.
I'm glad to keep this going. Just send me an email with some dates and times, and that can be our next project is to do that empathy circle exploration, even leave 3 hours, for a deep dive to be the first time around, and just let me know dates and times, and love to take part and support that.
Yes, 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 yes. Then I can invite you as well to, if you would like to see how my Monday night thing
Mm-hmm.
goes, you're welcome to drop in anytime.
Okay.
I do that twice a month, on the second and the fourth Monday of each month. And I would have to, you let me know and I'll
Okay. Yeah, just
make,
send me the invite and you got a Zoom room and dates and times and would love to take part in that to learn your practice.
yeah, yeah, to see how it goes anyhow, or
Mm-hmm.
what I do with
Yeah.
it. Yeah.
Well, good.
Well,
Well,
I
maybe.
was just going to say, well, good. And you said, well, good.
Yeah, bring it. We've done almost 2 hours, which is a good amount of time to.
Yeah, yeah,
But
yeah.
yeah, this is a lot of fun. I just it's a real pleasure to be talking to someone who's been thinking about this for so long and
Yeah,
involved.
yeah,
So
yeah.
this is a real like
Well, and
exciting.
likewise, that you really have done what I have done what we were attempting to do in changes that kind of died out, and you've made it happen. So I'm admiring of uh, what you've done, and yes, so
Okay.
it's my pleasure as well.
Okay, we'll keep it going. Just the next thing is just let me know. Send me that info and the dates for that empathy circle. I think that would be really great. And we'd need to introduce them how to do the empathy circle, and I can send you the how-tos for the exact structure too.
Good.
Okay, well, with that, I
Okay.
will say goodbye,
With that, yes,
Alan. So it's great to talk to you.
likewise.
See you. Bye.
Likewise.